Thank you very much. I'm excited to be back at Licking County. Last year when I came, that's right, I'm sorry. Last year when I came, I got up that morning and I had vertigo. And I've only had it one other time, and this one was way worse. And I was in Dayton, Ohio. We had gone to a minor league baseball game, the Dayton Dragons. And I got up that morning and the room was spinning, and I waited, left, got to ORTA, and had to stop and barf on the road twice. Got to the office and just laid down on the floor for a while. And I said, well, maybe I'm okay. I took the medicine you let dissolve, and it's supposed to calm the nausea. But I got here, I hardly remember any of it. Oddly enough, when I went out of the place, the Buckingham House, there was a shade tree there. It was nice and cool, and I just sat in my car for a few minutes, and it did ease. And I said, well, I can make it to my buddy's house. He lives in Granville. I said, I can make it from here to Granville. And I got to Granville, got on Berg Street where he lives, and I was feeling okay. I said, well, I'm going to try to get home. And I drove on home and made it, and ended up going to the physical therapist, and they can give you the cure for vertigo. They flip you and sit you up straight, twist you over and flip you over, and do a lot of these gyrations, and it loosens the crystals or reattaches the crystal. Whatever has to happen, it did happen. But it's crazy since that. Every morning when I wake up, I look at the ceiling. Good, I don't have it. Because I don't know how people who experience that can survive. I have some updates for you, and many of them are very positive. And I'll just start off with the big one. Wade Steen, the board member who was the lone voice in the wilderness 7 years ago, and was illegally replaced by Governor DeWine, was reinstated by the 10th Circuit Appellate Court. Yes. Oddly enough, the announcement, the court, whenever they released their findings or whatever, was last Thursday at 12:04. Wade's office is across the street from STRS. He grabbed the order, had it stamped by the court, walked into the meeting to a hero's welcome of teachers and retirees who were there. And the board was in executive session. He went to the executive session, knocked on the door, and reintroduced himself, and said he would be taking his seat. As you might imagine, there was some pushback from the leader at STRS. Well, we haven't had time to read the order. We haven't had time to see if we're going to appeal. And Wade's attorney said, I have a enforceable order by the 10th District. This is, in fact, his seat. And until you do something, this is his seat. If you fail to seat him, you'll be in contempt, in violation of a court order, subject to contempt penalties. So they reseated him. Everybody's happy, right? Even though it takes a year, justice finds its way to get served. Well, they came out of executive session, and then there was a back and forth argument, because Wade said, I want to be re-sworn in. I don't want there to be any discussion, any question of my ability to serve on this board going forward. And he had Kathy Bracey, if you know Kathy Bracey, with her Bible, and she was going to swear him in. And that whole arguing back and forth, 3 different motions by the chair, by different people, resulted in Wade being re-sworn in for his service to educators in Ohio. Now, here's the backstory. When they realized that Wade was coming back on the board, they knew they no longer had a majority. And on the agenda were bonuses for staff, the budget, some other very important things that needed to be taken care of. And the chairman, Price, Dale Price, said, well, I'm going to deviate from the normal agenda, and we're going to handle routine matters first and get this off the table. And so he moved, and that allows them to pay the bills. It's routine consent agenda. There's probably half a dozen things on it. Pay this bill, pay these bills, do X, Y, and Z. And so they said, okay. They moved the agenda item, voted to go out of order, and pass the routine items. Immediately then, Chairman Price, without a motion, without a second, without a vote, said, the meeting is adjourned. Hit the gavel, said the meeting's adjourned. Over the objections of a majority of the board. So now, if you're not an FFA person and you don't remember your Robert's Rules of Order, we begin, what is the proper, looking it up on your phone, what should be happening. And there was people talking over one another. You can't do that. You don't have the authority, and blah, back and forth, back and forth. And after maybe 4 or 5 minutes of that, then Chairman Price declared the meeting unadjourned. I don't even know if that's a real word, but he said, but we are going to take a 15-minute recess to get organized. He left the area, went over by the coffee, whatever. A few minutes later, he walked in, grabbed his coat and his bag, his book bag, and left. So now we're in the audience, and people, board members seated, kind of looking at one another. Are we in recess? Are we out of recess? Is the meeting still going? What's happening? Person from the Attorney General's office, who I'm advised by legal minds, by a bona fide lawyer, declared the meeting adjourned. He has no authority to do so. At least that's the opinion of the lawyer representing Wade. So he said, the meeting's over. You can go home now. And none of the reform actions that were planned were, of course, able to do it. Now, that was Thursday. We're still in recess, or so we think. And now they're asking different people. They're asking the Attorney General's office to clarify what the status of the meeting is. But the upshot of all of that is, it's yet another example of what STRS leadership will do to hold on to the money and power that they have had for 100 years. they absolutely know no shame. They have no shame. They have no regard for anyone other than how do I get paid, the most I can get paid, and do the least I have to do. So, interestingly enough, Governor DeWine started this whole mess and was a part of the original suit by Wade Steen. And he begged off and said, hey, I'm not a part of this. I'm not holding anybody's seat. And the lawsuit that Wade filed, the action, was called a quo warranto. And essentially that means I'm entitled to a seat and there is a usurper in that seat. The judge correctly, I'm told, ruled that this is a dispute between the person currently sitting in the seat and the person who claims, in this case Wade Steen, that that is my seat. So they dismissed everybody else that was named in the lawsuit. So it ended up being Steen versus Bishop, the person that the governor replaced Wade with. So the magistrate ruled in our favor. The other side objected, had to go before a 3-judge panel. That 3-judge panel affirmed the magistrate's decision that, yes, Wade Steen is the proper holder of that seat, giving a majority of the STRS board to reform-minded people. Now, they're not a one voice, one mind group. They just all agree that changes have to be made in order for our pension to fulfill its promises. Governor DeWine has said, well, this needs to be appealed. Well, he's no longer a part of the case. His opinion, like his first decision, is out of order. Interestingly enough, even though the law was very clear, and I have a copy of it here, their argument was this, and this is how ridiculous their argument was. Okay, the first person appointed to that seat serves at the pleasure of the governor, can be placed and removed without cause at any time, for any reason, or for no reason. You serve at the pleasure of the governor, despite there being a clearly defined 4-year term in the statute. And their argument was, well, no, that doesn't apply to the person appointed to the seat. That applies to the second person whom the governor replaces the first person with. Well, we knew how the judge was going to rule on that, or the judges, because one of the judges said, let me make sure I got this right. You're saying that the original appointee does have to look over his shoulder and be concerned with what the governor thinks, because he could get replaced at any time. But the replacement person gets the benefit or the protection of a defined 4-year term. And he said, yes, sir, that's our argument. And he said, that's absurd. So we felt good about our case. Now, whether they take it to the Supreme Court, whether the Supreme Court chooses to hear it, currently, politics in Ohio, I think there are 4 Republican Supreme Court justices, 3 Democratic. One of those 4 is Governor DeWine's son. we think he will have to recuse himself. Now, he says he's not going to recuse himself, but we think he must. With that, I don't know that they can get the Supreme Court to hear it. There has to be a grounds to hear it. I mean, there has to be a dispute of the facts or of the interpretation of the law, etc. And there is none. It's very clear. They basically are, their argument is only the second person gets the protection of a defined term. And as the one judge said, that's an absurd conclusion. Now, we've been getting a lot of media attention. I don't know if you watch Colleen Marshall. I'm a big fan of hers because she always has something. She always puts out our story. She's been a friend to STRS members, both active and retired, and she does a good job covering it. She was at the meeting, and they were filming the clown show that was, the meeting's adjourned, well, it's unadjourned, we're in recess, but I'm leaving. So it's interesting that the perception of just how embarrassingly dysfunctional STRS management and now a minority of the board are behaving, that they're losing all credibility. The Toledo Blade also had a person, he heard this was happening, so he drove from Toledo and did a very nice article about, the problems. Interestingly enough, STRS is asking the state legislators for more money for the retirement system. Now, ORTA's been a proponent of that since before my time. Our system has been underfunded. The average non-Social Security contribution rate for pension systems across the country would be around 24 to 26%. Ohio's at 14. We are tied for the lowest. In other words, our employers put in less, or the lowest, of any of the employers across the country. Our individual contribution rate, what my son, who's a first-year teacher, pays in, is the highest. So ORTA has been a strong proponent of increasing the employer contribution. Well, that's going to be a tax on all of us because our school districts are going to have to pay more. They only get their money from 8 Meadow Lane Drive in Delta, Ohio. That's where I live. So my taxes will go up. The concern I have is simply giving STRS, as it is formulated now, more money to mishandle is not a very good thought or not a very good idea. And I've had that said to me from legislators. Robin, you just told me how screwed up things are at STRS. And now the first thing you're asking me for is to put more money into that? That doesn't make sense. But I say, Mr. Legislator, it does make sense. Because here's what we have done. We have elected a board that now is cognizant of the need for reform. We finally, and at this time it was pre-Wade Steen having his seat returned to him. We've put in the framework to make the necessary reforms. Now is when they need the money because they can manage it appropriately. We can get rid of the bonus system. We can get rid of trying to beat the market. We can get rid of active management trying to beat the market and never being able to beat the market. So we think they're in a prime position. Now, of course, STRS wants us to strictly ask for the employer increase and stop criticizing STRS. Well, naturally, they don't want to be criticized. And my response is, I'll quit criticizing you. Make 2 changes, and we'll shut up. We'll go away. We won't say anything. Pick 2 things that you can do them. They're easy. Do them, and we'll stop being so critical. And they look at me and say, we're not doing not one thing. There is not one area we could improve. Well, then you're going to continue to get the criticisms that we level towards you. I want to update you on the Pension Defense Fund. Okay? If you're not familiar with what the Pension Defense Fund is, ORTA collected donations from ORTA members, from chapters, and they donated money to help pay Wade Steen's legal cost. And you would think, when you're right from the very beginning, and it's clear you're correct, why does it cost so much? It does. In round terms, we have collected $61,278. So think about that. $5, $10, $30, sometimes $100 from a very large grassroots group has added up to over 61,000. That's very positive. On the dark side, we've spent 61,700. So we're about 500 upside down, but money continues to come in. It's funny, after we put out a press release or after we put out a monthly newsletter, we'll get money come in. Hey, I meant to do this last month, sorry. So we still are collecting. So then I'll close with this. People say, well, what do you want? And I get asked that by STRS leadership. What is it that you actually want, Robin? And I said, well, what we'd like is for you to fulfill your promise. I know what I was promised when I retired. I have the documentation. Here it is. You can read it for yourself. You probably don't need to because you wrote it. I'm short, between myself and my wife, over $60,000 that STRS owed me and has not paid me. Okay? Looking in this room, some of you are owed a lot more than that. Okay? Everyone is owed a minimum of 21 of your COLA payments. So if you retired when you walked out of the door at Mingo Junction High School and your retirement check was $40,000 a year, your COLA was $1,200. You know, if you're older than that and when you retired, you got $24,000 in retirement, your COLA would have been about $700. Okay, 700 times 21 is still a big number. And next year it'll be more that you've missed. So they asked me, what problems do you see with STRS? Number one is transparency. They claim to be a very transparent group. Yet $20 billion whatever 20% of our investment portfolio is invested in alternative investments. Our board members who are elected or appointed as fiduciaries, meaning they have to they have to act in our best interest above the interest of the employees. So as fiduciaries, they have to know what decisions to make about our investments. They're not allowed to know what the costs, the fees, the charges of the Wall Street money handlers are. Now they sit on our board and they say, I need to see the documents. How much are we paying Blackstone? How much are we paying Apollo Group? How much are they taking out of the fund? Because it doesn't matter what the fund does if they take all the money. And they say, you're not entitled to know that. Well, who can know that? Only STRS employees can know what the fees are. I'm sorry, that's not transparency. We asked, when we found out about Panda Power, where we lost over $500 million in one stupid investment, the only way we found that out, somebody randomly got a copy of the Houston Chronicle. They didn't put that in their information. Now, they say it's in the information. It may be. If I get a 80-page report in 8 font with line after line after line of transactions, and there's one in there that shows that they lost that. But transparent to me would mean to the board, hey bosses, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I gotta let you know, we just lost $500 million in this one transaction. But don't get worried. We're going to make it up in other areas. And that's their answer. Well, but we made money in other ones. So that's where the transparency thing falls short. They also use data or use figures that support their case. Last year, they paid themselves a bonus on a total fund return that was based on gross of fee numbers. So if your local money manager says, hey, I got great news for you. I earned 22% in the market for you last year. You go, whoa, that's great. Yeah, it only cost you 24% to get that 22% return. We don't care what the gross return is. We only care what is the net return. But yet if the gross return makes them look good and they can earn a bonus, well, of course they put that out there. And then they might, when you ask them specifically, well, what was our actual net return? Oh, well, it was less by 60 basis points or something like that. And when you do the math, you say, well, you didn't meet the benchmark. Specifically, this thing that I speak of, the benchmark was 7.62. Just keep that number in your mind, 7.62. Just over 7.5, right? They claimed they made 7.68. Well, 7.68 is slightly higher than 7.62. I didn't take advanced math in high school, but I did take arithmetic. Then down lower in the document somewhere, and they say, and our net return was 7.53. Well, I know 7.53 is a smaller number than 7.62, which was the benchmark. So they paid themselves based upon a gross of fee return instead of a net of fee return. So that's one of the major issues that would fix everything. And I told the director, hey, you break out the documents, you give it to the board. Don't have to give it to me. Give it to the board members. They won't have support. Even the most ardent STRS management supporter would not support being lied to or being misled. Another simple thing that could fix the pension system is we have 100 plus, sometimes 110, sometimes 105 investment workers, traders. They're in a big old computer room and they're buying Apple, and then they sell it, and they buy Boeing, or they sell it, or they buy, Invicta and then sell it, and they're buying and selling like a stockbroker would. And they could just buy an index. They could say, I want to buy, you've probably all heard of it, Vanguard. It's just your broker sells it. I guarantee, looking at the age here, you probably own some of the Vanguard mutual fund. So they could just buy an index. And they could actually buy those indexes in the same allocations that they have as their board policy. For example, an allocation might be, we have to invest so much in large capital companies, so much in mid cap, so much in small cap. We have to put so much in, maybe it's energy stocks, wind, solar, oil, electric, whatever. And they have this policy that guides them how much money to put in each, call it basket, to keep working for them. Well, you can buy an index in those. They're not free, but they're very, very next to free. It costs virtually nothing to buy an index. And if we did that, Richard Ennis, a very well-known economist and pension expert, says, had they just taken their same allocations, invested it in passive indexes, we'd be $12 billion ahead of where we're at. All of the savings of all of the pension reform, charging people more money, making them work 5 years long, and taking away our COLA, all of those savings add up to $11 billion. So we have lost more in opportunities than we have saved by cutting our pension and charging people more. So we, meaning ORTA, we're not going to let this go. Now, I don't like being hateful, and I don't like being snarky, but sometimes my good nature is overridden by my frustration and anger. So we're trying to do the best we can to stay positive and see this thing through. It'll be a great day when the reform board members are fully seated, fully ready to go, and we start making massive changes at STRS. Last update is the executive director, who's on paid administrative leave, name is Bill Neville. He was placed on paid administrative leave, I think, in February. And it's $320,000 a year. It's a good wage to be paid administrative leave. He's due back in May. I don't know if I don't know what they'll do. I don't know what the new board will do. I don't know what the legal ramifications of his employment are. But he had to take some sort of in-service training. It was alleged he was violent and abusive and bullied people, sexual harassment. There were a bunch of charges against him. And the group that investigated him found no criminal activity, which, I mean, finding no criminal activity doesn't mean, well, I guess it means he's not going to jail or something, but it's not a ringing endorsement. So we'll wait and see what happens with what the board does on in the May meeting. So that's the update. I'm happy to answer questions that you might have. Some of it will be crystal ball. Yes.
Would you explain to them, because I don't know if I've ever said it or anything, about the bonuses that go to our investors?
Yes.
And I might be wrong on this, so we'll see. Sometimes they make more in the bonus than they
Yes.
do on their salary. Is
Yeah.
that correct? And their salaries are good.
The salaries are high, good, but they're stockbroker. I mean, STRS would tell you we're hiring people that normally would be living on Wall Street, working at the Wall Street investment houses. I don't agree with that. That's like saying the Columbus Clippers have a shortstop. We need to pay him what the New York Yankee shortstop gets. There's a massive difference in talent. But their bonus structure is 125% of their annual salary. So somebody making $300,000 gets a bonus, 300 plus maybe more, plus 325, something like that. So yes, their argument is without them, we would be far worse off. My argument is not if we put it in an index fund, we'd be ahead of where we are and we wouldn't have the salaries well, last year's bonuses were around 10 million. So the salaries was, just use even numbers, around 10 million. Cost us 20 million in salaries to do what we do, and we could have done it for I think 3 basis points. Nevada does what we do. Nevada retirement system is half as big as Ohio, and they have 2 people in their investment department. And we are twice as big as them, and we have 100 to 110. You had a question.
I was just curious. I heard that one of our bad investments was Bitcoin. Is that not?
No. They tell us, again, I don't know because they won't give the documents up. That would be one of those alternative investment things. Remember when the bank failed? Was it the one out in California? Silicon Valley Bank failed, and they had a lot of that cryptocurrency. And, immediately we began calling, hey, how much of that stuff do we have? I see it's listed. We owned Silicon Bank. We owned it, and we lost whatever we had invested, but it wasn't like a big number. I think they said something like 27 million. Maybe it was 17 million. It's a big number for me, but when you got 91 billion, it's not a big number. It's a very small thing. And so then the question was, are we invested in cryptocurrency? The answer was, we do not directly invest in cryptocurrency, which is different than saying we have no cryptocurrency. Because if we put our money into Apollo Group, a hedge fund, and Apollo Group then buys cryptocurrency. Well, we don't know how much of that, we actually have. The thing with the hedge funds are, we give them just use a number, $100 million, a small investment in the hedge fund world or in the private equity world. And they take their fee off because they get a fee just for handling the business. And then could be a 10-year commitment on that $100 million. So in year 3, we say, hey, how's that thing doing? They go, it's doing great. You can't believe how good it's doing. It's wonderful. Oh, good. Understand that they set the value of it. So if you buy your house, you paid $300,000 for a house. And somebody says, hi, Mary, I'd like to buy your house. It's worth $700,000. You got the money, it's yours. And they said, well, wait a minute now. You paid $200,000. Yeah, but it's worth more now. Well, says who? Says me. That's how the market of dark money, the alternatives, works. The person who holds the asset tells you what it's worth. Nobody comes in like, I could open up the paper, USA Today, and say, how much is Delta Airlines trading for? And you'd look at it and say, oh, it's $85 a share. Oh, I got 100 shares. I know what I got. Okay? You can't look up Blackstone or, some of these obscure things like, there was one that went out of business, and we had it, of course. We didn't have a lot of it, but we had it. So that's such a volatile market, and it's so risky that we think we get the heck out of it. We put our money, just like you do with your Edward James or your Merrill Lynch advisor that handles your money. You put so much in bonds that you have to have, fixed income things, and you put so much in money markets or indexes. And when the market does good, you do good. Market goes down, you go down. But the market usually doesn't, all 3,000 Dow Jones companies all don't go down at the same time. And when you're picking losers and winners, that's when you're at greatest risk. So, yes, ma'am.
Isn't Weinstein's term up in September?
It is.
So does the governor then appoint somebody else?
The governor will appoint someone else. Safe to say it won't be Wade. I get it. And that's nothing against the two people that he appointed. The people that he appointed to replace Wade, one didn't last very long, Mr. Bishop. Pereira was pushed off last week. They might be great human beings. And all I can say is how they voted, and they voted lockstep with STRS management. And so with never questions asked, like, hey, I'd like clarification on this. I mean, you would think, and I get it's such a complex thing, their board packets must be massive. And to try to know exactly what's going on in a $91 billion pension fund. But you know what you can know? You can know when people lie to you that you can no longer trust them. Well, maybe they'll quit lying anytime now. That's not the approach to take. When they've proven themselves to manipulate data to present themselves in the best light so that they can get a large payday, it just doesn't make sense. And when you think of it, simply, it's a conflict because the people have to take this enormous risk in order to get their paycheck. They wouldn't do that with their own money. And yet, because it's our money and it's really none of our money, because STRS claims that is their money. They are the sole custodian of that money, that we really, all we've done is bought an interest in the company, so.
So then wouldn't we be back in that same situation where we don't have the majority?
No, because we're gonna win an election that's going on right now. Michelle Flanagan, I'm glad you reminded me, I would have forgot about that. Michelle Flanagan is running for STRS board member. ORTA's committee interviewed her and endorsed her. She'll be an excellent board member, and she is of a similar mindset that reforms are indicated and that we will get, so we'll still have a majority. So encourage all of your active friends, because you're like I was. I don't know that I ever voted in an STRS election the entire time I was working or retired until I got to ORTA. You know, you get them thing, I don't know any of these people. I'm not going to vote because I don't know, and I throw it in the trash. Same thing I do when I go to the polling at my local precinct, and it's for like county commissioner. If I don't know those people, or Supreme Court judge, if I don't know them, I'm afraid to vote for the wrong person, because you're 50-50. You pick the wrong one, you help the bad side win. So we're just not as well informed as probably we should be. But you had a question. Somebody right over here, yes.
I just wondered, who owns the STRS building, or the Taj Mahal, as some call it?
We do. Our fund paid for it, $100 million.
How much does it cost to run it every year?
Oh, it's staggering.
It just seemed like.
It should be. It's got heated sidewalks. It has brick paver parking garage. It has a gymnasium. It used to have a daycare center. Has really outstanding cafeteria, place to cook food, or kitchen, and all of that. The offices are around 20%. They work 20% at the office. It was made for 700 and some people, and we have 500 employees, and 20% of them show up on any given day. So you can play golf in it. It's got 2 waterfalls. Got a lot of artwork.
Can we go there and do that?
Yeah, well, as long as you're not with me. If you're with me, they're not letting you in the door unless you have an appointment. I would encourage you, you're close enough. You could go over every month to the monthly board meeting, always the 3rd Thursday of every month. They don't meet in July, but go watch them. You will be amazed. Yes, sir.
How many political appointments are there on the board?
Oh, good question. The board composition, real simply, 5 people are elected by active teachers, okay? 2 people are elected by retirees. So you have 2 direct people on the board. We think that ought to be 4 and 3, because there's as many retirees as there are actives now. And we have legislation that's being drafted to address that. They said, hey, that's not even fair. I mean, we're Republicans and we agree that that's not even fair. There are 4 appointed people. The governor gets to appoint 1. The Treasurer Sprague of Ohio gets to appoint 1. The House Speaker, Stevens, and the Senate President, I can't think who that is, but they combine and they get 1 pick. So they have to agree to pick somebody. And then the fourth one was appointed by the Board of Education, the State Board of Ed, and it was the superintendent or their designee. Now that position is under the governor. So the governor has two picks. We've already addressed that with the Republican leadership, and they have agreed that the governor should not have two choices, two picks on our pension board.
So that's under the Constitution, that's his authority to appoint people.
Yes.
To the board.
Yes. It's actually in the
Seems like a
law.
conflict of interest, because he's
Oh.
not, he's never been in education, so why does he get to put people on the board to control educational?
Why would he get two picks is even
Well,
more
one,
egregious.
I don't understand why politically they get to put people on the board when their people have not been involved in education.
I can give you the rationale behind it. We elect teachers. I'm going to guarantee you, outside of Rudy Fichtenbaum, professor of economics and retired, not one of those people is an expert. They don't, I mean, the work, they're in so far over their head. Now, some are really struggling hard. I work on it every day, and I get lost in when the T curve hits and inflation gets here. This is what's going to happen in the market and soft markets, and I get lost myself. But the governor is supposed to appoint a financial expert, and everybody is supposed to appoint what you'd call a competent financial expert. Now, when you look at what the governor has done to teachers in Ohio, and I voted for him. I thought he was an outstanding governor during COVID. I supported, would have voted for him again until this last business happened. He has expanded vouchers, trying to put public schools out of business. There's no other way to describe that. You've got, if 20% of the schools are performing miserably, simple, Governor, fix those schools. Don't fix my school. My school's doing fine. We live in a small rural community, and it's not Oxford, but we're doing well. Kids can go to college. Some of them do, some of them don't. Some of them go to the JVS. We have a good school. Don't try to put Pike Delta York out of business because you want to give some private school public money. God bless people who go to Catholic schools and private Christian schools. I'm happy for them. But don't take public dollars to do that. And I'm especially sore about it because 20 cents out of every dollar that goes into a voucher would have been in STRS. So 20 cents on every dollar goes out of STRS to the private school or the Catholic school or whichever one, the charter school. And then got rid of the Department of Ed. Now we would go to the governor. Is the governor going to decide what an English teacher ought to know, be enabled to teach English? The workforce development person? I've met those people. They're not ready for that task. We had problems with ODE. I mean, we always, I remember during our lunches when I was a teacher, a principal, or a superintendent, and the first thing they said is, "Hi, I'm from ODE and I'm here to help." And everybody goes, "Oh God, I know what this means." And it was going to be bad news for us. But they're so much better than having the governor's office do it. So, well, it's been a pleasure, and I'll stick around, and if anybody has something afterwards, feel free to ask me. Thank you.